seems to be the time when we have all those the 10 best and the 10 worst sorts of lists, and I've had every imaginable one, of course, presented to us in this season, and every edition of magazines has some kind of top 10 list of some kind. Every tabloid TV has a top 10 list of some kind. There's even serious articles in serious newspapers that have the top 10 best or top 10 worst movies or videos or books or dresses or trends or investments or colleges or places to live. And you can just go on and on. They go from sublime to ridiculous. And it's funny, isn't it? Until somebody decrees something to be the best or the worst, you never really thought of it that way until that list. When I spoke a couple weeks ago on waiting, and I was talking about waiting on the phone for my father's health plan and how annoying it was, one of the congregation found a list for me of the most annoying things to hear when you're on call waiting. And so and this was actually a scholarly article that somebody had given me. I guess it was to help, thank you for helping my sermon tickle file. So most annoying things to hear while on call waiting in order to get an answer for something. Elevator music, Muzak, of course, that's the best of it. Rock music, a little worse. Offering a call back, that's okay, but still kind of annoying. Being informed how long the wait is. You have 4 days, 360 times. Being directed to the website. We're really glad you're called. Please go to our website. Just a busy tone. That's second most annoying. And the most annoying one of all is the one that I used that day, a recorded voice saying over, "You are a valued customer." Indeed. In today's gospel lesson, Nazareth is in the worst list. The newly called disciple Nathanael responds to the information about Jesus' birthplace with a sort of snooty, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" Nathanael's nasty knock of Nazareth has led sort of to generation after generation to assume that Nazareth was famous for being infamous. But in fact, it's surprising. Historically, nobody really knows where the original Nazareth is. There's a Nazareth there now, but that may or may not have been the original one. The place was so small, it was infamous for being unremarkable, is really what it was about. It was such an insignificant kind of out-of-the-way village that there really wasn't even anything to say about it, and there's no public record pretty much except for John's Gospel. Until John's Gospel, the no-good Nazareth was really a no-place Nazareth. And from the viewpoint of the 21st century, we can never really properly see what that first Nazareth was really like. Our vision will forever be changed by the call of Nathanael. So why would John, in all the words he's going to use about the life of Jesus, continue to preserve and see as important a rotten reputation for where Jesus is from? What does a bad reputation from Jesus' hometown offer us? Think about it. Think of this gospel writer offering sort of what's called verbal intensive care to a world that needs a Savior that's accessible to absolutely everybody. Have you ever heard of verbal intensive care? It was kind of big in the 80s. I think it was pastoral care sort of thing. Verbal intensive care offers people, when they're in the midst of a terrible crisis, some believable but accessible, comfortable words. So instead of denying a situation, verbal intensive care sort of addresses the immediate needs of the person. So instead of coming up on a car wreck and promising, the injured individual who's lying out in the street, "Oh, everything's fine, everything's okay, it's all good," and they know everything's not okay. "I can't get up, everything's not okay." Or, of course, there's the other hand of it, where you come up on the accident and you have the actual opposite extreme, which you shouldn't do. "Oh, God, don't die. Oh, my God, don't die. Oh, my..." Not really very reassuring either from somebody who's there to help you. So verbal intensive care deals with the real. Verbal intensive care tells the truth. "I know that you're in pain. An ambulance is on the way. You're not alone." Verbal intensive care. So I think at somewhere level, John is trying to give us sort of a verbal intensive care. Telling the truth, it's real, tells the truth about all of us, where we're from, what it's about, Everybody has a Nazareth place, even if you're not from Bakersfield or Blythe. Some other side of the tracks type of place in our life. Our readings today are really about the call of our whole life. So matched together, there's sort of a strange set of readings when you get them. You get, of course, the call of Samuel, a young boy, who's called to prophesy against the guy who tells him it's God calling him. And then you get on the other side of the equation, you get Nathaniel, who ditches Jesus' hometown. And then in the middle of it, Jane says, why do I always have to read about fornication? A story of fornication. Jane came up to this morning and complained, why do I have to always read about fornication? God's claim upon our whole life, young people, older people, our whole being, inwardly and outwardly, is being covered by these lessons. And somewhere in our whole lives, there's another side of the tracks kind of experience. Maybe the other side of the tracks is money. Maybe some of us just don't have it. Maybe we're genuinely poor. Maybe the other side of the tracks is some sort of social tie. Maybe we're just not socially acceptable somehow. You know, think about high school. You know, for those of you not in high school, sorry, it's coming. They're out of the room. Good. Too geeky. You know, not athletic enough, or too jockey. You know, too slow, too sad, too different, too wimpy, too moody. For some of us, it's a flashback to high school. Our Nazareth is that place on the other side of the tracks. For some of us, it's maybe physical. We're too fat, or we're too skinny, or we're too ugly, we're too smart, we're too disabled, we're too young, or we're too old. Our readings today cover all those spectrums. There's no such thing as too young or too old to be called by God. In our souls, though, there's some place from which we're coming from, Nazareth. Nathaniel's question, can anything good come out of Nazareth, can come from lots of places in our lives, not just categories, but events. Can anything good come out of the loss of my health insurance? Can anything good come out of my job loss? Can anything good come out of being too young? Can anything good come out of feeling too old? Can anything good come out of my spouse's death? Can anything good come out of my child's addiction? Can anything good come out of a nation divided? It's in these worst times and in these worst places of our life, strangely, paradoxically, that God's action begins to pour in. This is what Paul would call in 1 Corinthians, not the passage that Jane read, but he called it the word of the cross. It's the wisdom of God compared to worldly wisdom, where the strength of God's power comes in our weakest places, sometimes the places that we think are most forsaken. You know, the Nazareth kind of place. What the world calls the worst of the cross, the ultimate of tragedies. This is where God offers his greatest strengths. E. Stanley Jones was an amazing missionary, Methodist background over a century ago. He was born 1884, and at 21 he became a missionary in India, where he lived and loved almost his entire life until 1973. Jones was offered to become a bishop in the American church, but declined it in favor of continuing his mission work. E. Stanley Jones wrote his last book, The Divine Yes, when he was 83 years of age. So for some of you, there's still a book in there. The age of 83 is not what makes the book remarkable, though. It's that E. Stanley Jones wrote The Divine Yes after suffering a severe stroke that paralyzed him. In the last 14 months of his life, Jones was convinced that God wanted him to produce yet one more book, The Divine Yes. He was unable to write. He was barely able to speak. But with the help of his daughter, he dictated the book as best he could into a cassette recorder. The book stands as a summary of all of this world-renowned Methodist missionary's evangelist work and his perspective about God. It was like a last will and testament, if you will. The book begins as strong as a book can begin. It says, Jesus is the yes, the divine yes. The divine yes, the book, that was last written by E. Stanley Jones at 83 years of age after a crippling stroke in which he could barely speak and could not write, was the best-selling book that E. Stanley Jones ever wrote. The book was written from his Nazareth. Working out of Nazareth is not a comfortable commute. When God is up to something in your life, there are kind of two things that you can count on. Martin Luther described one perfectly. Where God builds a church, the devil will build a chapel. Evil is active and will gladly move in and add more chaos to the crisis. But the second certainty we can cling to as well, and is that God will do God's greatest work in the worst sorts of places. God does God's work in the worst of times, in the worst of people. God does God's greatest work in the worst part of you, in the deepest, darkest hole of your life. That's where God will send the deepest roots of redemption and forgiveness. This is where Jesus hangs on the cross for you. It's the part of your life that needs to be redeemed. And in what looks like the ultimate defeat, the cross would become the world's and your greatest salvation. When we're able to live from our Nazareth, when we're able to get associated with that place in our lives that's sort of the other side of the tracks, if you will, it becomes the source of our greatest intimacy with others. You know, I mean, some of you are pretty impressive people. I mean, some of you have advanced degrees, you've done amazing things in your life, you've held titles that are just like, really shiny and, impressive sorts of things. And yet the things that most affect me are the places in your life that are soft, the places that have hurt in them. Those are the places where I feel attached to you. And I would imagine those are the places where you feel attached to one another. It's not our strengths that build the greatest community, it's our weaknesses. It's the Nazareth that builds the strength of a church when we can share genuinely with one another about the hurts, the pains, the brokenness, and the sorrows of our lives. Then comes alive in us the joy of true and genuine community. That's why Nazareth is important. And we all have a Nazareth. If we're serious enough about our lives, those places in our hearts and lives where we hold something that we believe is sort of the other side of the tracks, that's out of Nazareth. Where is that place in your life? This is the place of our most effective witness. It will be the place in which Nathanael is immediately turned. This is the key that keeps 12-step meetings so vital and vibrant in this community, in this building, where people share and expect to present and where they expect to hear what good is there that comes out of that Nazareth. And time after time after time, it's the place where God pours healing and redemption and salvation. But out of Nazareth comes God's best to bless others and bless the world. But may we be a church that can embrace some of that with one another. Instead of seeing opinions that divide us, or positions that we don't actually appreciate, or jobs that we don't understand, or things that we envy about each other, maybe instead that we'd have some true, genuine sharing of each other's Nazareth. And in that place, become true church, a place of redemption, a place where God touches earth. That's the reference that he made to Nathanael, right? It was the Bethel scene where the angels descend, and at Jacob's ladder, the angels descending and descending. It's the place where heaven touches earth, is where we come in contact with our Nazareth and use that painful gift to bless the world. May we have courage for a deeper journey with one another, and may we become his church. Amen.